All right. What's going on? CNN10, April 29th. The main story, maybe if you've been watching the news or whatever, you probably already know this, but it's not the State of the Union address. CNN will talk about why it's not considered the State of the Union address, but we might call it the president's annual message, maybe annual address, once a year. Just because I think they say word for word at CNN10, something like, because the president has only been in office, it's 100 days, they're not fully aware of what is going on, or they can't really comment on what's going on. So last night's annual message, it looks exactly like State of the Union. Next year, about this time, probably a little earlier, maybe in January, President Biden will give his State of the Union. It's a little bit more official. But last night, what President Biden did, and we kind of predicted that the day before, he laid out his plan for the next 4 years or 8 years, he might have said. He has been at, let's just call it what it is. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. President Biden is 78 years old. So when re-election comes around, he'll be 82. If he serves for his full 8 years, I'm not really great at math, but I think that means he'll be 86, which, no matter how healthy you are, like, hey, bravo, like he looks, fairly fit and everything, but 86 is still 86. And the president of the United States is one of the most demanding jobs ever. You can look back, you can do a Google search and look at like President Obama, first day in office, last day in office. He served for 8 years, but he looks considerably older than he did, like more than 8 years than when he started. President Bush, same thing. President Clinton, same thing. President Reagan, same thing. Those are all presidents that served 8 years, and it really takes a toll, I think, on a person's life, because it's just such a demanding job. All the important people. They're just all the important people were in that room. So senators, House of Representatives, the Supreme Court justices, they were all in there. So like the most important people in government in that one room. The Constitution is quoted in CNN10, and it starts off with "he shall." I don't remember the exact quote that comes from the Constitution, but the Constitution says, we've talked about this, the president needs to address a joint session of Congress once a year. And it starts off with "he shall." And I'm just wondering, like, maybe one day soon we won't be able to say simply "he." There might be a "she" in there. Who knows? We'll get to maybe we should talk about that right now. So every time, let me pull up a picture here. Every time there is a joint session of Congress, like take a look at this picture. It's kind of iconic. You have the president in the middle. Over here, always the vice president. And over here, you always have the Speaker of the House. So last night, for the first time ever in history, you had 2 women standing behind the president. Who knows? One day, will there be like all 3 women there? President, vice president, Speaker of the House. And those right there, you're looking at this picture right here. You're looking at, if the president passes away, like, my goodness, can you imagine if like something horrible happened right there? A bomb went off or something. Security has to be so tight. But president, if something happens to him, next in line, vice president, something happens to her, Speaker of the House. So you literally have like the 3 most powerful people in the nation standing in the same place. And for the first time ever, it's been 2 women there. And one thing I didn't think of until I read it is that these 2 women actually are both from California. So California, our biggest state. I don't think we talked about that in this class, but it's definitely our biggest state when it comes to people. And also our biggest state when it comes to economy too. It's like the 5th or 6th biggest economy in the world, just California by itself. All right, so what else did President Biden talk about, I have my notes over here that I'm glancing at, Afghanistan. So we've already talked about that in this class, that one of his big goals in the near future is to get the majority, like almost all, of the troops out of Afghanistan. And you'll see he makes a couple points like the people who are fighting in this war weren't even born when the war started for some people, or like their fathers or their mothers were fighting in this same war that they are fighting in now. He also called for unity. Like, who can argue with that, right? Democrats, Republicans, you'll hear like the other side of the aisle. So they're very far apart right now. They're really not getting along too well. President Biden was asking for unity to bring everybody together. I mean, who can argue with that? But they're pretty far apart on a lot of major issues. He also talked about police reform, ending systemic racism, and that word, it's a big word, systemic racism. It's a little different from, two people on the street and one person calling the other person like a racial slur. Yeah, that's definitely racism, but systemic, it means excuse me, doesn't mean coughing. It means system wide. So at one time, maybe even still today, but like if you need a loan from a bank, if you watch Falcon and Winter Soldier, by the way, this was part of it. If you go into a bank and you get a loan, at one time in this country, it was almost inevitable. If you went in to get a loan and you were white, you were more likely to get that loan than if you were black. That's what we're talking about with systemic racism. So it might, obviously you can see that I'm white, so I don't have the full understanding of this systemic racism. I can only comment on what I've heard and whatnot. I've never actually felt it, of course. But so President Biden was calling for an end to systemic racism. I mean, hopefully everybody's on board with that. How can you argue with that? And then in the end, he was like, really had some high praise for the United States of America, saying like, we are the best country, patriotism. That's it's never a bad thing, right? We all are Americans. We want to say that we are really good at doing things. And so that's how he ended his annual message. You'll see that. But every time the president gives a State of the Union address or an annual message, the other party has to have a rebuttal. They have to come in and say, well, this is why he's wrong. And I think the Republicans, there's a choice of like, okay, who is going to do it this year and stuff like that. And I think a really smart choice that the Republicans made, because the Republicans get a bad reputation for being just like mostly white dudes. Like if you look at their party, their makeup, it's mostly white dudes. There's some women sprinkled in, and then there are some people of color sprinkled in, but the majority, it's not. The Democrats definitely are more diverse. That's plain to see. But there was a senator that they came in and said why. It's always one person from the other party. Party agrees, and they picked a Southern senator. He's from South Carolina, and he happens to be black. So that's a really good message, I think, that the Republicans sent, saying like, hey, we are a little bit diverse. Hopefully they feel like, well, we could do a little bit better. But and Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina, had a bunch of you'll see it in CNN10, does a great job of saying why President Biden is maybe like misguided. I'm not sure if he ever comes out and says, he's wrong about this, but like he's saying us Republicans, we see things a little bit differently. So the trivia question, I got that wrong. I don't know. It's like 3 or 4 days in a row. And then because I think CNN10 goes over some pretty heavy topics with like the political stuff, the last part of CNN10, I hope you're going to like. I'm not going to say anything about it, but it was pretty funny. I definitely laughed. All right. I hope you enjoy it. Of course, I'm here if you have any questions about CNN10 as you watch it.